Hi everyone, Sherry Sokolowski here from SLS Event Planning and Consulting. Today we're going to be talking about event insurance and what you need to know, especially at a time right now. And I have brought on with us today an event insurance specialist. His name is Jack Buttine, and he is with Buttine Trade Show and Exhibition Insurance, and he has had close to 40 years experience. And I thought, wow, what better person to have on today to really talk with us about event insurance, because right now at a time where we are in a crisis where events are put on hold, or even any time down the road, when we're planning for when events come back on, what can we do and what do we need to know in regards to event insurance, what kind there are for us, what availability is, what kind of premiums are we looking at, and what are their advantages in helping us when we're planning our live event. So Jack, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. Well, Sherry, thank you very much. We're all working from home, so I hope everyone on this video is safe and their family are safe, and the dogs who will eventually bark in the background are safe as well. But my name is Jack Buttine. I insure trade shows and special events. And we also insure a lot of ad agencies, so I keep an eye on advertising. And there's most insurance commercials annoy me, but there's one, I think it's State Farm or it's Farmers Insurance, where the guy goes, "We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two." Yeah. I think that probably applies to lots of folks. But in the trade show space, it certainly applies to me and my colleagues. In my firm, I say it's a job for life because we have very low turnover, and we have great employees, and they've all been insuring shows. I'm probably there the longest, but we've got a lot of show experience in our ranks. So to get going into this, we're all in the live event business. Trade shows, conferences, exhibitions are the touch and feel, face-to-face, hopefully within closer than 6 feet at some point in time. But we're all in that business. We're in a face-to-face business. And the insurance part of it is pretty much 3 kinds of insurance. If you're in the meeting business, and you run the same meeting year over year, you've got a very profitable event going. I always think that's the perfect candidate for event cancellation. And regardless of the size, once you get to about $250,000 to $500,000 and above, and we're just involved with a trade show that's in the middle of being canceled, and it's a $35 million event. That's going to be a big event cancellation policy.
Yeah.
If you borrow $100 million to go buy a couple of $35 million events, you buy all the insurance that you can find. Now, if you're in the more entrepreneurial end or the other end of the spectrum, I think you still need insurance. The beauty of event cancellation insurance is that it guarantees your profit against nearly anything that can go wrong. Now, up until now, nearly anything that can go wrong generally included virus, and virus was for sale. I think the track record is, it just came out in the news today that Wimbledon, and I know the folks that insure Wimbledon, they've been buying event cancellation insurance for 100 years, for as long as it's been around. They've been buying communicable disease insurance for the last at least 17 years. They just canceled Wimbledon. That's going to be a huge claim.
Wow.
But the folks that do the buy-in, they view their event cancellation insurance as the world's best form of sleep insurance. I was thinking, if you're adequately insured, you should be able to sleep well at night. I refer to cancellation insurance as the best form of sleep insurance. Though I have a customer who's probably the biggest American trade show organizer, they refer to cancellation insurance as the greatest form of customer service. We'll talk more about it later, but what the customer service part of event cancellation is that if your event cancels and I'm your attendee or I'm your exhibitor, the insurance allows you to give back everything I gave you. And you can't make up for my lost sales. You can't make up for my investment in time and marketing material and all that expense.
Right.
But what you can do is the insurance policy lets you give back everything I gave you. Now, we can talk more about refunds and how that actually works. But that's the one policy we'll talk some about today, the event cancellation insurance. The other one is general liability, which comes in two types. You're the organizer. A lot of your constituents events, I would guess, are in hotels.
Yes.
Hotels sometimes are lax on insurance requirements.
Yeah.
But that means you shouldn't have insurance. Just means they don't keep up with it as well as you might if you're in the Georgia World Congress Center or the Javits Center, or McCormick Place, or any of the big venues. They'll be very tight on insurance.
Yeah.
But the hotels generally let you, not as strict, but you still need insurance. The two types of general liability insurance, regardless of COVID-19, are you, the organizer, in case someone slips and falls coming into the venue. Someone eats bad shrimp somewhere at your event. I always smile and say, well, yeah, that's a clear lack of leadership on your part.
Mm-hmm.
Someone ate bad shrimp, or someone drank too much wine and went out and got hit with a bus.
Right.
Another clear lack of leadership on your part. But we'll talk more about how you should handle the general liability when you've got other stakeholders, folks serving wine or folks preparing meals for you.
Okay.
And the other kind of general liability is exhibitor liability. Now, exhibitors, I know in conferences are fewer, but still, exhibitors cause claims. Most event liability claims are not caused by the show organizer. A hotel can do a sloppy job cleaning the access way to your meeting, and someone can slip and fall on water that was left there because someone was watering plants.
Mm-hmm.
That's not your fault.
Right.
But another one, the exhibitors can leave their suitcase in the aisle and someone trip over it, or not want to pay $400 for the carpet rental, so they bring their own carpet in and someone trips over the carpet. Another clear lack of leadership on your part there.
Exactly.
Kind of a matter. So those are the two types of general liability insurance. Sometimes, let's just switch gears for a second.
Sure.
Now, given the three kinds of insurance that we've been buying for years, no one wants to talk about fires or a power outage today. We all want to talk about the impact of COVID-19, which kind of makes sense.
Sure.
Eventually we're going to be out of this, and I think exhibitors are going to be short money, attendees are going to be short money. There'll be tons of government bailouts out there, so resurrecting the show is kind of outside the scope of my expertise, but we're seeing folks adapt already. Like one big organizer is Tarsus. I was reading about Tarsus, and they organized 146 events. They canceled one in China.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of talking about event cancellation insurance here.
Yeah.
They canceled one in China, rescheduled 45, and I guess the other 100 shows just haven't been impacted yet. But rescheduling is an option now.
Right.
I was thinking one impact of the COVID-19 on insurance, whether you buy event cancellation insurance, which is good or not, is when you schedule your date in October, when can you reschedule it for? What if you have a resurgence or something comes up that you can't hold your event as planned?
Right.
The option for alternate dates is going to be big.
Yeah.
When you have events, I think back to again, kind of talking about event cancellation, whether you have the insurance or not, the specter is still out there. The combo is going to be big. You'll have more access to data, and people will expect you to use that data better, because it's going to come out. If your facility has an outbreak, or your city has some sort of virus outbreak, now what? The question of refunds comes up. Question of rescheduling comes up. There's some events I would guess you could reschedule. You know, if you've got a Christmas buying show that's in July, we can't reschedule that show to November because it doesn't work for the buying cycle. You know, really big events sometimes have conflicts with other events in their space, so that doesn't work. But when you're buying insurance, if you find out what rescheduling opportunities there are, if you're buying event cancellation insurance, find out what rescheduling opportunities you have, put those on the application. And make sure your local broker, your gets the word to the underwriters that, yeah, if we can't have this event in October, there is no problem with rescheduling it to November. Now, someone told me yesterday they have an annual event. Works great. It's been around 100 years. This year would have been the 101st event for this show. Never had a loss. And the insurers wanted to know if they could reschedule. They said, well, we looked into that. But if you have an annual event, and this is a huge trade show,
Right.
if you have an annual event and you reschedule it 3 months in the future, that means the next one is 9 months away.
Right.
And it wouldn't work in their business. So rescheduling is not always an option that works well. And again, back sort of thinking about cancellation insurance, communication is huge. Getting in front of rumors is big. You know, exhibitors always seem to hear that the show is canceled. Everybody always hears something is up. Doesn't mean anything it actually is up, you know. But this use of social media, getting in front of the message, let folks know that you're looking into what the options are. Just let them know that you're thinking about it. I always think one of the most important parts of that communication is, if you have insurance, the exhibitors don't care. Like if I'm your exhibitor, I'm your attendee, I gave you $1,500, and you're thinking about the show's probably not going to happen. You don't know yet that they built the hotel just had a field hospital built in its convention center, but you don't know what the options are. You're thinking about, you know, and we're probably going to have to cancel the optics. You know, you got to be always concerned about optics. Let them know. But when you're letting folks know you're thinking about your what's available to you, don't say we're checking with our insurer, waiting for him to get back to us, because that, you know, that's the fact that the organizer has a side deal with me or another underwriter doesn't mean anything. The exhibitor's deal is with the organizer.
Yeah, they don't care.
Yeah. We see that all the time. Whether it's a snowstorm claim in New York because of the Super Bowl, well, we're thinking about it. We're going to talk to our insurer and get back to you. I said, well, no, that has nothing to do with anything. I always think that's a good example of a bad example in communication. So,
exactly.
Yeah, optics are big. So I don't think we're getting any questions coming in, so I'll kind of continue to march here.
Yeah, I do have some questions though. As you were explaining, you know, because a few things that I know come along my way as this thing is happening with, you know, what kind of insurance should I have? You really explained event cancellation insurance and what that means and what that could benefit for. So you basically said that it guarantees your profit against anything that can go wrong. So let's say, you know, some of the people that are watching or listening to this are saying, okay, I've got an event booked for the fall of 2020, or maybe even as early as this summer. And is it too late for them to contact someone like yourself to add event cancellation insurance for an event that is already booked? Or is it only available for people who haven't quite booked the event yet? Can you explain how that process works?
Sure. When to buy an event cancellation insurance is a huge question. I always think the answer is very simple. As soon as you have an economic interest in your event, buy insurance. I tend to use the phrase a good example of a bad example. I always think a good example of a bad example is a firm, and a lot of time it's an association. They buy insurance when their budget gets approved, which makes sense, I think, if you're in the finance business. But if you're in the insurance business, it makes no sense at all, because your budget gets approved January 1st. Your event is February 8th to the 12th. So you buy insurance on January 2nd. Your event is insured for 2 months. Then the event concludes. You start selling space for next year's event. You're incurring obligations for next year's event, but you have no insurance. We're doing one of the New Orleans hurricanes, big show. Yeah, the same thing. It wasn't our client, but it was a buyer, buys insurance every year, and the budget's approved in February. Well, the show was in March. The New Orleans hurricane was probably, I forget the exact date, but I think it was August or September. Well, it wasn't available. The insurance wasn't available. That show was about a $19 million show. They could not buy insurance because it wasn't for sale when their buying cycle caused them to usually buy insurance, which unfortunately was always 2 months before the show.
Oh,
so
really?
You buy in, yeah. It's hard. It makes perfectly good sense, I think, if you're in the budgeting business, but if you're in the risk management business, it makes no sense at all. They just lose you.
Okay. No, I'm still here.
Okay. I just lost the video here.
Yeah, the video on Jack is going in and out. Just so y'all know, Jack has a home on a boat, so his internet is a little in and out. So just kind of recapping a little bit of what you said it's if a person has an event right now booked for the summer, it's not too late for them to call and say, hey, I would like to add event cancellation insurance, or maybe they don't have insurance just yet. It's not too late for them to have it. In other words, they can.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's always for sale.
Perfect.
When we sold somebody insurance once 7 days before the event, and I thought, wait. What do these guys know that I don't know?
Right.
But it was big mistake. Oh, God, everyone's going to lose their job if they can't place the insurance. Would you do us a favor? We get it. And they didn't have a loss, but if they had a loss, I would have been in big trouble.
Oh yeah, I don't think. Yeah, if I was having an event like you said, as soon as my economic impact is happening, is when I would want to have it. I mean, a few days out before the actual event, I think by then, event cancellation insurance is not the insurance I would want. I'd probably would want liability, like maybe increase my liability insurance or something like that. Yeah. So that's good to know, because that's a big worry on a lot of people's minds right now, is because none of us have a crystal ball on when, this case being right now what we're in, the COVID-19 crisis. We don't have a crystal ball when we know live events are going to come back on. And because so many other people had to reschedule, like all those that you were telling me earlier, not only are live events having to work around the schedules of their own businesses to reschedule, but other people who had to reschedule, and weddings and reunions and bar mitzvahs, all of these other things that typically happen certain times a year, but now they've had to have them canceled or postponed because of live event gatherings not happening. So, it's a great thing, I think, for people now to call up. If you don't have a company that you can reach out to, Jack can certainly help you out, I'm sure. So Jack, I don't know if you know or want to offer this answer, but I'm sure this is a question too. What does the typical premium look like is there like a range for a certain size or a certain amount dollar amount? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. At the moment, if you asked me before 9/11, I would have said it was 1/4% of your gross revenue, 25 cents per $100 of gross revenue. It's a cycle. After 9/11, it went up to 1%. It's $1. It was $1 per $100 of gross revenue. But since 9/11, not a whole lot of not a whole lot of terrorism impacted events, but insurance has been getting cheaper for a number of reasons since for the last 15 years. So the traditional price is 1/4% of gross revenue. Let me restate that. The traditional price is 1/2% of gross revenue. Prior to 9/11, nearly 20 years ago, it got down to 1/4%. After 9/11, you have a big event. It impacts the whole insurance industry, and it goes up to 1%. up before Christmas, like right around Thanksgiving, we were insuring shows. We're listening to the rate here, 17 cents per $100, less than 1/4 of 1%.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So it depends on what's happening
Now,
on what the cost is going to be.
yeah,
Right. So now I'm
yes,
sure it's more.
now, yeah, absolutely. Because after I said Thanksgiving, you're at 17 cents. But now all the insurance companies, they buy their own insurance on January 1st. Even though the insurance companies are charging less and less for event cancellation, they still have more bad weather claims, big fire claims. You know, the investment results are not great. That was before January 1st. You know, the quotes we had out before January 1st, you better buy them now. And most people generally did. Yeah, because now they even included communicable disease before January 1st. We were selling communicable disease up to about February 1st.
Oh,
Then
really?
it got very difficult. Yeah. Now I think you asked me the price. I'm giving you such a long answer. It's driving me nuts, you know.
Well,
Probably, would you please just give me the answer? Answer the question, please, you know. But right now, it's probably about 1/2 of 1%, about 50 cents.
okay.
And in the questions have got a lot different too.
Sure. Yeah.
Generally, communicable disease is not available.
Okay.
Like right now, like today, it's not available.
Okay.
A couple weeks ago, it was available for one day. Take it or leave it. Take it or
Really?
leave it. It's available today. It's available to close business today. But
Wow.
today, now, not available. To put together big limits, which may not apply that much here, you have to pay for the bigger the show, the more you got, the more you pay. But if you're in sort of in that $1 million and less range, we think in gross revenue. I mean, a lot of people think in attendance or net square feet. We
Right.
think in gross revenue.
Okay.
Yeah, be 1/2 of 1% of gross revenue, and it would not include at the moment communicable disease. The communicable disease that we had for sale, and it'll certainly come back.
Yeah.
Did not include diseases you knew about. Like we would cover COVID-20, but not COVID-19. You know, things we don't know about, we would cover.
Right.
But at the moment, the impact of covered communicable disease claims pretty much has driven the underwriters out. You know, there are fewer people writing this kind of insurance now because the wildfires, bad weather claims, various other floods, big one, flood-related claims drove them out of the market. So we had fewer underwriters, fewer insurance companies on January 1st. Now it's even worse.
Yeah, I bet.
So to answer your question, I'd use for a planning factor 1/2 of 1% of gross revenue.
Okay. Well, that's a good way to try and figure that out.
Yeah.
So the big key here is for those listening and you're trying to figure out what's it going to cost me, what's it going to cost you not to have it is the answer to that. And I'm sure Jack can agree with that 100%. And two, you're going to need to know what your gross revenue is going to be in order to figure out what the cost is.
Yeah, I think both of that's true. If you would put two asterisks in there, one, when I said the event cancellation insurance cover you for anything that can go wrong, usually I say, you know, I hope I said nearly anything that go wrong. There are some exclusions. The exclusions at the moment, of course, are communicable disease, war is excluded, and nuclear disasters excluded. If people just don't come to your event, nobody wants to go, you know, your topic isn't timely or relevant, or people would just rather go watch the Bears play football in Chicago than come to your session. That kind of stuff is not covered. But things that are outside your control, generally, you know, most of them are covered. I can't think of any claim we ever turned down.
Okay. But to talk about that for a quick minute, so communicable diseases aren't covered right now, but what is happening is travel restrictions, quarantines, the fact that social gatherings are not allowed. If that something like that is to continue, and let's say someone who's listening to this has a summer event still booked and they don't want to say it's a July, August event, or maybe even September, they don't want to rebook or cancel it just yet. They want to hold it out, but they contact you. They get event cancellation insurance. The time comes where they have to make the decision on having the event, and before they decide to cancel or rebook, if the some measure of the quarantine is still in factor, social gatherings are still restricted, or a certain number. Like I think in the beginning process of this last month, it started with social gatherings of thousands or more. Those had to be canceled. And then it went down from there to a point where it was like 10 people. So can you talk about that?
If the proximate, sure. Here's what I hate to use insurance buzzwords, but here's a buzzword for you.
Okay.
If the proximate cause is communicable disease, like it sounds like it would be, in all those instances, it would not be covered, because communicable disease, because right now it's just flat excluded, but if at some point it became back on the market and you could buy communicable disease, it wouldn't include cancellations or impact of COVID-19, SARS. The three big ones we know about are COVID-19, SARS, and MERS.
Right.
Those three. Those are the ones that would not be covered. Probably avian flu, bird flu, miscellaneous stuff. Things we already know about, it would not be covered. So it's a problem.
Gotcha.
Again, it used to be if your event didn't happen, the choices were sort of limited. There's kind of a new choice out there, I think, that's interesting. You can cancel the event. I always tell the insurance companies, look, nobody wants to cancel an event. These organizers, they're going to have to be nearly out of business. I'm trying to avoid saying nearly dead, because I always said these guys are going to have to be dead before they cancel this show. They will never cancel a show. No one wants to cancel a show. Trade shows mean business. So you could cancel it, which didn't happen much. You could postpone it, just put it off to some unspecified time in the future. Reschedule it, put it off to a fixed date in the future. Here's another one. This is the new one I read about and heard on. Actually, I heard about it on a conference call the other day. Combine it with somebody else. Your dates are so tight, but shows are also smaller. So combining, and you probably can't combine a sewing show with an auto part show.
Sure.
Maybe you can combine, two software shows or something like that.
Okay, that's
so
outside
combining
the box,
I think is an interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting option. That's something new.
Yeah. I will have to look into that myself, because that's what I'm doing right now. Is I'm trying to hear the buzzwords of what's trending right now for the live event community, because we all know at the end of the day, when things open back up again, there's going to be a new normal. None of us know what that new normal looks like. I think there was even talk, but looks like we lost video again with Jack. He'll be back on here. But there was talk of airplanes. The fact that we are so squeezed in, what's that going to do with the airplane industry and how airplanes are made? And are they going to have to go back and redo all their airplanes because of how close we are to one another? So, the new norm, we don't know what that is. Hopefully, it'll be good things that come out of this. I'm sure there are going to be some good things and not too many bad things. A couple of other questions that I did write down. You were mentioning, and forgive me if you guys hear dogs in the background, as we were saying in the beginning of this, we are working from home offices, so my neighbors got their dogs out, letting them roam around and play. But we have the question of general liability insurance. That is in my 15 years of doing events, that's the big thing that I always hear, when I'm doing a contract negotiation with a hotel. Almost all the time they have a clause in there that requires the client, the group as they call it, to provide general liability insurance coverage of anywhere from $1 to $2 million. And then they require that they provide a certificate of insurance that puts the hotel on their policy for those said dates. Is that something that you could talk about a little bit so that people understand
Sure.
what that's like? And
yeah.
Okay.
So generally, sure. General liability insurance, pretty straightforward. It's still easy to buy. The premium is a function of your attendance. There's always a minimum premium the minute you try, that's another insurance buzzword. The smallest amount that the insurance company will charge to give you the promise to pay that $1 or $2 million policy limit, that's the minimum premium. For an event, it's probably $600 to $800. Not too much impact on COVID-19. The one thing on COVID-19 were the general liability underwriters, which they normally expect to pay trip and fall claims. They normally expect to pay, somebody alleges my bad shrimp example, or another one, someone drank too much, goes outside, gets hit with a bus, and blames it on you. I mean, in those kind of examples, you're probably not you're not cooking and giving out shrimp. Somebody else is. So the risk management step here is whoever's giving out the shrimp, you get evidence from that company or that person, and if they have insurance, you get evidence that those folks have insurance. I always use it when I got my video back. I always use the example that as a rule of thumb concerning general liability insurance, anyone that you pay money to for delivering goods and services to your show, you don't pay them until they give you proof of their general liability insurance. Because you can always buy, back to Sherry, your question, you call me, we'll give your event insurance. If not the same day, we'll do it within 2 days. So that is not difficult to get. You just need to know who to ask. That's not difficult to get. What I think is the important part is to know who the other stakeholders are. And short of the organizer standing in front of the hall and punching somebody on the nose on the way into the venue, there's really nothing that the organizer can do. Not many things the organizer can do that'll cause a claim. So yes, the hotel asks you for general liability insurance, but you remember my rule: anyone that you pay money to for goods and services, they should give you proof of their insurance before you pay them. That's never quite that simple, I know, but it's pretty good. It's an easy rule to remember.
Yeah, and for those, and for those listening, to kind of speak on that specifically, is like audiovisual. That's always a big thing. The hotel requires that, and it would not be a bad idea for you also to have a copy of their certificate of insurance as well, because
they get asked all the time.
Yeah, because they've got their wires taped down and people can trip over it.
Yep.
So yeah.
Absolutely, because kind of in the long term here, all the audiovisual companies, like all the bus companies, all the catering companies, you all have, we're sort of changing gears a little bit here. All of you, in relationships. And right now it's going to be very difficult. We have trade show decorators and conference setup companies and audiovisual companies as clients.
Yeah.
Those guys have contracts, with the customers. Like you have contracts that, your members have contracts, and they all include force majeure clauses.
Right.
And that's something we may want to talk about. But I think exhibitor and attendee loyalty is going to be key. How we treat the exhibitors and the attendees if we cancel or postpone an event is going to be key. Question comes up all the time. I paid you $1,500, and I will not send my employees in harm's way. Send back the $1,500, and we'll see you next year. Right. Now you've got your expenses, you've got your employees, you've got a long-term relationship with that attendee, maybe, or you just want him or her to come back next year. So what do you? It's kind of like, okay, now what, tough guy? What's your plan?
Yeah. And
it seems to be, I always talk about giving money back to the exhibitors. In real life, nobody actually gives money back to attendees or exhibitors in the first at the first discussion anyway.
Right. Yeah. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oops, sorry. What most folks want to do, even if it's an old school cancellation policy, where you had a fire and you rescheduled the show, I always say we give money back to the exhibitors. Well, no one actually likes to do that. You roll it over to the next event, unless for some reason, I've been an exhibitor for 30 years. I'm retiring. I'm not coming back. Okay, here's your money.
Yeah.
I hate you people, and I'm not coming back. you are the worst group I've ever seen. Well, that guy's not coming back anyway. And then you can refer to the cancellation clause in your space sales agreement that says some version of, if we don't cancel, if we don't have the show, we do not have to give you back any money at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
yeah,
it's
point that out.
really, yeah. And I always tell my clients this too. It's always super important to have some sort of agreement, even if it's a one-page agreement, just kind of making sure that every role and responsibility is clearly defined. So any speakers that you bring upon have agreements with sponsors in your trade show, whether it's only 5, 1, 2, 3, 5, or even more than that, you should have some sort of agreement between you, the organizer, and them. And as well as, audiovisual vendors, all of these, as Jack said, people that you're exchanging money with, not, of course, your attendees. You should have something with them, a disclaimer letting them know of certain things that they're agreeing to by being a registered attendee of your event. That's a whole nother discussion. But you mentioned something earlier, and it was actually leading to my other question, was the force majeure. When we were trying to go into a little bit more diving deep of the event cancellation clause, and those people that have events still in the books for summer and into early fall, they should be reaching out and getting a quote for event cancellation insurance if they don't have one yet. But if they're looking to cancel, to use that event insurance, if their event cancels because the quarantines are still in effect, it may not apply anyway because of the COVID-19. So it brings up my question about the force majeure. Now, I know, Jack, you and I talked about this briefly the other day. You're not a force majeure contract clause expert, but we can talk about it a little bit in a way that if your force majeure, like for example, I'm going to throw this out there. One of my clients' events, we have booked this summer, late summer in August. That particular boutique hotel is actually physically closed right now until June 1st. And they said there's like no one to reach out to. There's only one person. It's a lot of hotels are like this right now. And they will say your force majeure is in effect right now. It doesn't, because of what's happening, it doesn't matter. And I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really say that for sure. Hopefully we'll have a lawyer on here one day real soon. That your force majeure, doesn't matter how detailed it is, you could still rely upon it. And then when the time comes, come late summer, or into early fall, we also have that same force majeure that we can rely upon. I'm not quite sure if we lost Jack or not, so I'm going to...
No, I'm here.
Okay, cool. We just lost video.
No, I'm here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, it's
So do you have anything you would like to add to what I just said?
No, sure.
Okay.
No, absolutely. Force majeure. No, of course, I'm not an attorney, and we've interacted a lot with attorneys on force majeure clauses and other clauses that are relevant, at least to insurance. But I think they definitely are a subject for careful legal review in the sense that what I do know on force majeure is, one, you need to have an act of God, and it has to impact your event, and it has to make your performance impossible.
Right.
So I think it's probably not reasonable for a boutique hotel for an August event to have nobody in the office today and say they're going to rely on their force majeure clause to let them out.
Yeah.
Because you don't know whether they can perform that contract. The lawyers would probably have an interesting view on that claim. Because can they really not perform in August?
Right.
We're up and running. We've rescheduled the New York Auto Show from April to end of July, beginning of August.
Yeah.
If they're running the New York Auto Show and they're running events in the nearby cities, wherever that boutique hotel was, saying that we can't perform, that might be a stretch. So the thing about force majeure is whatever bad act is out there has to actually impact your event.
Exactly.
And time would certainly. You mentioned something about contracts before. I just wanted to point something out too. On general liability with your venues, unless some hotels, they don't always ask for general liability.
Yeah.
But they do generally, when they ask for it, they'll generally say, number one, we want you to have $1 to $2 million worth of general liability insurance. Mm-hmm. No problem. Easy to buy. Price is a function of your attendance. and no one ever says it costs too much. Probably less than $1,000 for 1 million if you have 100, 200, 300 people going to your event. So the cost not a big deal. But then the hotel says, we want you to name us as additional insured.
Yes.
That's pretty much the end of it. If you're asking to be additional insured, I got that. That's one thing. But in that hotel contract, there was no requirement for here's a buzzword, there's no requirement for that show organizer to indemnify the hotel. Without that obligation of the organizer to indemnify the hotel, if there's no indemnity and insurance paragraph in that hotel contract, if it doesn't say organizer must indemnify hotel, that additional insured stuff doesn't work. So it's a belt and suspenders deal. You need both. You need to, one, name the hotel as additional insured,
Right.
and two, the hotel's got to make you indemnify them. So that's kind of one of the fine points, one of the finer points of insurance buying,
Gotcha.
that we really got to check on. And it comes up all the time. And the problem is it doesn't get picked up all the time because there are not that many claims. But if you have a claim, the hotel, one of your folks, your exhibitor caused a fire, one of your 8 or 10 exhibitors caused a fire or some physical damage to the venue.
Yeah.
The venue turns around and people were, smoke inhalation, who knows what.
Right.
Of course, the hotel gets sued. They turn around and give their suit to you, along with a copy of your certificate of insurance that you called the hotel an additional insured. Then you give it to the insurance company expecting to get paid, and the insurance company says, send over that contract that requires you to indemnify the hotel. And that's where the problem starts.
Gotcha.
So a little belt and suspenders there.
Yeah. So just to clarify exactly what you said, because hey guys, I'm learning something new myself. So just to clarify what you're saying, there typically are, if insurance is even brought up in a hotel contract, because it's not always brought up in a hotel contract. And if it is, the wording that I've always seen is more along the words of any third-party vendors need to provide certificates of insurance. And typically that's like trade show decorators, if they allow caterers and audiovisual vendors, things like that, but not typically the organizer itself. Sometimes the wording will include that, but there's a separate clause that talks about indemnifying, holding harmless or something between the organizer and the hotel. But what you're saying is that the words have to be within the insurance part of the clause, not a separate indemnification clause.
There needs to be in the hotel contract, there need to be two things. Number one, the requirement for, what you were looking for is, one, a requirement for insurance. Two, the insurance requirement probably say the organizer needs to name the hotel as additional insured. And often it stops there. What you need is a third point. The hotel needs to be indemnified by the organizer. That's that indemnity wording where the organizer needs to indemnify the hotel. That's what we're looking for.
Okay.
So you certainly need insurance, number one.
Yeah.
The hotel wants to be additional insured on the organizer's policy, but no, that's easy to do. Just call it, you call up the insurance broker, send over certificate, no problem, here it is. But if the broker didn't ask, let me see a copy of the contract that requires, is the third point, the organizer must indemnify the hotel. That triggers the insurance policy right there.
Got you. Okay, so if the contract...
That's the key.
That's the key. So if the hotel contract says that the organizer must identify the hotel within that, and you have the hotel add it to your insurance policy for, just those event days, God forbid something happens and the hotel falls back on that, as long as it says the organizer indemnifies the hotel within the hotel contract, then they're covered in that insurance policy. But if it doesn't, then the claim won't be accepted, and then there's probably some other kind of legal things that we won't get into that you have to worry about.
All kinds of bad stuff happen, yes.
Yeah.
Bad stuff will happen.
Okay. So is it, and and if you don't want to answer this question, I completely understand. But given that you know
No,
this knowledge, if you don't, is it important to the organizer to have that wording on the hotel contract? If it's not there, make sure it is there, or just
absolutely,
don't worry about it.
absolutely,
Okay.
no, absolutely. If you guys, even if you write it, it's easy. The hotel probably has a contract. Might just be a letter,
Right.
but sometimes it's more less. It's probably less formal than the Georgia World Congress Center.
Yeah.
Some pencil on the bottom of the letter. Hotel. I'm sorry. The organizer agrees to indemnify hotel.
Okay.
I mean, that's as long as it's done in writing before the loss, the way the insurance company said. It goes the other way too. You've got a contract with someone to bring flowers in or water the flowers every day. That's not a big deal. It's not a whole lot of money change hands there. Probably not a contract. Maybe it's just a purchase order.
Sure.
Okay, fine. On the bottom of the purchase order, florist agrees to indemnify show organizer. Now, that way you ask the florist for his or her certificate of insurance. The florist names the show as additional insured on the florist general liability policy.
Mm-hmm.
When
Mm-hmm.
someone trips on the water, that's fine. You had an agreement in writing before the loss that you were indemnified by the florist, or maybe the
Wow.
or the AV company. Or AV company probably have a contract with.
Yeah.
But the AV company probably give you their. Sometimes the AV company is bigger than the show organizer, so you get the
Yes.
standard contract.
Right.
Right on this bottom of the standard contract, AV company is required to indemnify show organizer above where the guy signs it, and somebody signs it.
That's a gold nugget right there, Jack.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the many takeaways that I have from our call today, because I'm always looking. I already have about a 10 to 12 page RFP, request for proposal, that I send out to venues for my clients, and half of those are clauses that I've negotiated over the 15 years. But I don't think I particularly have a clause. I may, but not really realize the impactfulness of it, I guess, is the word I'm trying to come up with here, of how that is tied to your liability.
Very significant.
Yes, it is very significant. So for those you listening, that is a huge takeaway, huge takeaway. So as we wrap up here, Jack, you've given us a lot of great information. I want to remind those that are listening that Jack is a specialist in the event, the exhibition insurance, trade show insurance. His company is Buttine Trade Show Exhibition Insurance. We will make sure, and Jack can let us know before we end here, his contact information, but we will also make sure that we put that in our notes here, that people that are watching this and listening to this can reach out to you. I'm assuming that you are accepting new clients and be able to help those that are looking for event insurance. Is that the case?
Yeah, absolutely. Sherry, one last point. If I could squeeze in one more.
Absolutely.
This
Yes.
is you should never. Insurance folks talk about insurance all day long. It's only interesting, of course, to other insurance people. But the people find this stuff really great are other insurance guys, and most of them don't like it either. But here's one last COVID-19 I think tip.
Yeah.
Your general liability, and you run your show. It's in August. It's right after we've come back to getting close to normal business. And all of a sudden someone says, I went to your show and I felt fine. Now I don't feel so good. I think I got COVID-19 at your show. Mm-hmm. That's going to be hard to prove. But the general liability companies are expecting those claims.
No.
What will happen is they will pay general liability exclusion, probably, because all the exclusions for viruses are really not out there yet. They may be coming, but not yet. So they're expecting to get tagged with those claims. They're expecting to maybe pay defense costs, but they're not expecting actually lose in court. Because how do you know that I didn't get it on the plane on the way to your show or in the Uber from the airport and things like that? But here's the thing. I think 2 points. One, the show organizer should be able to show that they've got daily health status checks in your morning meetings,
Mm-hmm.
should briefings on hygiene and cleaning status inside the venue.
Yep.
That's number one. Number two, and I think we do this now to some extent, be sure you can instant message or have contact with all of your attendees and various stakeholders. So if something did come up at 2:30 in the morning on this before this opening of the second day of the show, you could call everybody and say, so we have an issue with cleaning, show up at 11 o'clock or something like that. Those last 2 points.
Right.
Probably have daily health status meetings on briefings and include hygiene and cleaning.
Yep.
And two, be sure you can catch up with and contact all your attendees once they're on show site.
That's some great points there. And actually, speaking on the first point that you mentioned, I did an interview with a gentleman in the emergency concierge business for events a few weeks ago. And he and I met last year before any of this was even a thought. And it's a business he's been doing for years because he came from the Homeland Security area. And we talked about what this is going to look like for, the new norm for events. And, it's funny, I had those conversations with my clients and they're like, well, hotels should be constantly cleaning anyway. I'm like, well, yeah, you would think so. But here's the things people need to realize of what's going to happen when we come back. If you do have an event, as Jack said, in August, and things are open back up and you're able to legally have your gathering again and you've got some attendees there, the hotel may be short-staffed. So you need to make sure that, you talk through it with them and say, what are your plans? Are you going to be walking around throughout the day, even if you have to wear gloves and masks still, and pick up all the trash, make sure all the door handles are clean, make sure the bathrooms are clean. Now, they can't do it extensively, but throughout the day, and so that is something definitely that I am working with my clients on when we do get back to live events again, what plans we're going to be putting into place. And if anyone listening has questions about that, certainly feel free to reach out to me and we could talk a bit more about that in depth of what you should be doing in those plans, because I agree 100% with you, Jack, on that. And the second point that you made about the instant contact with your attendees, that is something too that people need to be thinking about. Some people already have something like that in place or have had them in place with their events through mobile apps where they can stay in constant contact of letting them know what's happening. Don't forget, we've got this reception tonight, or don't forget to go check out so-and-so's booth. But this may be something that you want to put into place regardless of what's going on with your event. If you don't have a real need because you don't have sponsors or breakouts, you may want to have some sort of text messaging put into place or mobile app to do instant messaging, or even through Facebook Messenger. Think of something, and if you need help with that, certainly reach out and we will put you in touch with companies that can help you make that happen, because we do need to realize that there will be a new norm, right? When we get back to gatherings again, there's going to be a new normal way of dealing with instances, because this isn't going to go away, not anytime soon. So thank you, Jack, so much. Do you have any other great tips other than what you've already shared with us that you would want people to understand and realize? I think the big thing for me today, I'm very super grateful for your time, is the explanation you had given us for the different types of event insurance people can think of, the event cancellation, the general liability, how right now, because this is kind of how I found you through another article, how communicable diseases, I never even knew that were such a thing until this happened, how right now it's not something for us, but maybe down the road for COVID-20, those undiscovered viruses and diseases and things. But thank you for explaining all of this to us. It's super important for anyone who has a live event scheduled, still on the books down the road, or is considering to have one down the road, to seek out someone like Jack who can explain to you your options and what those costs are. As we learned, they're very minimal. Sometimes it could be 50 cents on the dollar of your guaranteed revenue or your gross revenue. And like Jack said, last year, the end of 2019, right before Thanksgiving, it was 17 cents. So depending on when you call, will be dependent upon what your premium is. But certainly our walk away today is event insurance is definitely something that you want to consider. You can't afford not to have it nowadays. And if you seek someone out like Jack, who is, an expert, he's been around for almost 40 years in the industry. He's just shared with us today quite a few golden nuggets that really aren't insurance, but as far as what he sells, but it's insurance for us to know and realize and understand what these things mean so that we can protect ourselves down the road. Jack, would you like to share with them how they can get in touch with you?
Sure. My telephone number is 212-867-3630. That's in New York, 212-867-3630. My email address, pretty straightforward. It's 3 letters, JMB, like John Matthew Buttine, JMB at Buttine, BUTTINE.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jack, for your time today. And I will certainly make sure that everyone has your information as well within our note messages here so that they can reach out to you. Again, this is Sherry Sokolowski from SLS Event Planning and Consulting. Today, we spent some time with Jack to learn about event insurance and what it is you need to know to protect your live event now and in the future. We hope you stay safe, and if you have any comments or questions about what you heard today, please reach back out and leave your comments below. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe.